Hello there, I'm Geraldine Doog. Welcome to a special Saturday Extra Forum on the future of coal. Now, normally I broadcast from the rather safe environs of the ABC Centre at Ultimo, but we've come to one of the real centres of Australian coal mining. That's Newcastle, the Port of Newcastle. You can see all the coal loaders behind me lining up ready to get their booty, because this is an extraordinary source of production of Australian black coal, very good quality coal. But is it also to be the centre of a growing debate about whether this industry has a future? Copenhagen might change a lot of the ways in which we debate the future of coal. We've gathered a group of people together who are all specialists one way and the other in the industry, and people from the region, to consider coal in 2020. Where will it be?
Tony Proust. Everyone, or I hear a lot of reliance, a lot of assumptions that clean coal is the answer. Of course, we know that Mr McFarlane doesn't believe it's going to happen in the short term. What's plan B if it turns out it is a dud?
I wouldn't get too carried away with some of the propositions that the opposition is putting forward. That's his personal observation. And no one's, I think, arguing too that that is the answer. I've tried to paint that there are a range of things that I think you have to be working on. There's energy efficiency in commercial and residential buildings. We've got a long way to go to improve all of that. We've put forward various programs that are starting that process. There's getting a carbon price into the economy. There's mandating a segment of the electricity market for renewable energy sources and shifting investment into renewable sources. And you have to be working away on a range of things. 10 years, if you can predict accurately where we'll be in 10 years from now in terms of the energy mix that we've got in the country, that's good. But we've got to get some policy settings in place that will start to drive the change. And whilst I know that there are all sorts of different views about emissions trading schemes or the pros and cons of what the government has put forward with the carbon pollution reduction scheme, I can say clearly that I don't agree with a comment Bill made a while ago, because I've sat down with a whole host of companies in a whole host of industries that are emissions intensive, and a carbon price starts to change the dynamics of those enterprises and those industries. And I'm certainly convinced that we've got to get on and do that, as well as the other policy settings that I pointed to earlier.
But Greg, what about your own constituents? Do they come up to you and start to say, hey, are you on our side or not? I mean, they must think sometimes there's a bit of a conflict of interest here.
Well, yeah, there's a range of coal mines in the electorate that I represent. And of course, the Hunter is a hugely important area for coal mining, and this is the largest coal export port in the world. So there's a little bit of interest in my portfolio area. I've got 25% of the baseload power generation in my electorate as well. And of course, this is New South Wales electricity generating heartland in this area. We've got aluminium smelters and all the rest. This is an emissions intensive economy in this region, and it's quite right to highlight that issue. And I'd say I'm not sucking up to Tony, but the good work that the Coal Miners Union has done to bring its members along means that there is a fair deal of thought about this. But it's worth observing that the coal industry itself, to give you some of the other side of this debate, the coal industry itself, at least on the experience we've had to date, is not prepared to shoulder some of the responsibility that we face in dealing with climate change. They don't want to be included in the CPRS, and if they are, they want to be compensated to the tune of $10 billion over the next 8 or 9 years or so. And the government is not going to accede to that. And yet they have walked away, run their advertising campaign and the like, created some fear in communities like this amongst coal mining families for their jobs. And really, we just need a good deal more maturity from industries like the coal industry, and a recognition that that industry, amongst others, has to share some of the responsibility here.
Richard, quick response before I go to Tony.
Well, I think it is important that we recognise that electricity in this country has been a very cheap and reliable thing over the past few years, and people take it for granted. And I think people need to have a greater appreciation of the cost of electricity. And so I think that we're going to see prices going up, and I think that that will change people's habits. So I'm fully supportive of what the panel says about energy efficiency, because I think we can do a lot more in this particular arena by being more efficient consumers of energy.
Yes, but it's actually how your industry's behaving, though, you know, running big campaigns and so on, advertising campaigns. Are you behaving like a mature industry?
No, our industry, the electricity industry is investing in those new technologies I talked about before, wind, solar, geothermal, as well as gas-fired generation. We're trying to move the portfolio away from coal as quickly as we can, but you can't do it overnight. These are big, capital-intensive industries that will take some decades to be able to move away from the current fuel source.
Mind if I go? Is there nobody here who actually works in coal who'd like to say something?
I don't work in coal, but I just feel driven to answer that, Geraldine. We're all dependent on Mother Earth surviving. It has to come before our wages. All of us have to be prepared to make allowances for the habitat.
But do you depend on coal yourself? Like, I just wonder whether people are here who are talking theoretically versus those who literally do depend on coal. Yes, please.
My father works in the coal industry, in a subsidiary industry, but he's worked in coal mines and power stations my whole life, so I've been directly supported by the coal industry. But now my father comes to climate change protests with me because he's ashamed and upset that he's working in an industry that is threatening the future of the whole planet, and he wishes that there were sustainable industries that he could be working in.
Yes, I must say thank you, by the way. Final remarks, Tony Ma, to you. So by 2020, this suite of measures you're talking about, is that going to come only after a catastrophe, or is it going to actually unfold? Is the politics going to shift in a way that introduces it in an orderly transition?
I think the change in the energy mix domestically will happen probably from the current policy settings, and you know, we'll have an awful lot more wind. The power generations will use a lot more gas. I think it's almost impossible to build new coal-fired facilities whether they have a regulation or not. I think that, you know, there's little doubt that between 2015 and 2020 we'll have the flagship programs, solar, thermal and CCS. We then need to make an assessment about what we do with the replacing the remainder of the fleet. And
there'll be jobs in those new...
There'll be jobs if we handle it smartly. We've got to make sure we don't miss the boat like we did with solar PV and miss the boat like we did with wind. We need to make sure there are industry policies to get the jobs in those new technologies. There's a question mark over gas as to whether or not it goes to the export price. Internationally, the extent to which developing countries can use higher cost emerging technologies like solar thermal, CCS, geothermal or anything else depends on a whole lot of things, largely finance. And there's a clean development mechanism that can play a bit of a role for that. It's currently limited to forestry issues as I understand it, but there needs to be a much bigger funding from the developed world for all of those things. If we want them to develop a different path, then we have to pay for it. That's actually the big question.